Steve, for coming here tonight. It's very exciting to have you here and listen to what you have to say about your work. And Steve just mentioned that his mum's in the audience tonight, which is also very exciting because I think it's your mum that was responsible for pushing you into getting off your butt and doing the job, getting something, rather than just lounging around after school and wanting to take it easy.
No, well, that's right. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was finished school and, swimming out in fresh water and having the time of our life, and I was like, she just said, about time you got a job, so get off your ass, and took me in and met a few people and, had the opportunity.
And the rest is history. Good on your mum, because it's meant that there's a lot of fantastic work that we get to enjoy as an audience, and you've proven yourself to be quite a talented storyteller. So I think you've done us all a favour there, Mum. Appreciate that. So, Steve, you've flown in from Sydney last night, but Darwin is your base, but you do have to travel quite a lot for your work, which has its perks, I'm sure, because you get to meet some really interesting people and see some interesting places. But Darwin is still home for you, I presume?
Yeah, Darwin's home. It always will be, and it'll always be my base. It's where I'm from, it's where my family is, and Darwin's what's made me. And do travel a lot. Been on the road since about January 20 this year. So back and forth every month or so. Been around Australia a couple of times, 3 different jobs, and try to get home as much as possible. And it's deadly to have the screening tonight, Darwin, a big name no maker, because we haven't had one yet. I mean, it's screened on ABC TV in Melbourne and Sydney and that, but no, it's good to be here.
Yeah, and do you find that as you write stories which become not just local stories, but they're universal tales of humanity and relationships between people and decisions that we make, where do you get inspired by those stories? Are they experiences that you've had? Are they experiences that other people have had? Are they bound geographically, I guess, from your experiences? Or
I think over my lifetime I've soaked up a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I'm a real sort of, listener. Real sticky people could say. So when people are having conversations here and there, or something happens in the street, or you see something in the newspaper or something on the news, it just sort of sits there, and maybe it'll come out one day in some form or another. But I think it's about just soaking up the world around you, and for sure I think it's growing up in Darwin, and my childhood experience has informed a lot of who I am, and the stories I tell, and yeah, absolutely.
So your first job in this industry was with the NT government, I understand, so as a camera or a production assistant, and your interest in camera initially was from an interest in photographs, in particular as you were a young boy looking at photographs, black and white photographs. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, my mum and my auntie Dottie used to have all these old photos of their family, their grannies, and I'd noticed to just pour over them. And there was just something in the eyes and in the faces that really sort of said something to me. I don't know, it just grabbed me, and I used to just look at them all the time. And I wondered what was going on in that photograph, what was happening outside of that frame. What brought them to that spot when that photograph was taken. And then that sort of evolved, and then when Mum told me to get a job, I got introduced to this department in the Chief Minister's Department, Aboriginal Liaison Office. It was making a program called the Aboriginal Video Magazine. And then they offered me a job, and I was a pack horse basically. So that was for 6 years, and then a couple of other people worked with us, Mango Anderson and Victor Raymond, so we got to travel all around the countryside, in the territory, meeting a lot of people and, telling stories, and so that sort of gave us a good grounding and an introduction to the whole production process.
So you're basically a trained cameraman, trained sound recordist?
I wouldn't say that.
Oh, okay.
I have done sound.
I know you have done sound.
But my
we weren't telling anyone that you weren't trained for the job. Someone just handed you a mixer and a microphone and said, off you go, don't stuff it up.
And my cable wrangling skills.
Oh, not good. Oh. Amy, you might have to teach him a few things. Amy's a student at Charles Darwin University. Okay, right. I never really got the cable thing either. Yeah. So So, but now your key role is writer, also director. Is that something that you feel most yourself in, or do you like going between roles? Are there certain things about being a DOP, a director of photography, or now that I know that you've got a trained sound recorder, so I can't say that you might miss that, but are there certain aspects to a particular role in filmmaking that you have a real affinity for, that you feel that's your role?
Well, I've sort of stepped away from shooting for a while now. Every now and then I'll, a couple of shots here and there, but directing and writing is where I'm sitting at the moment. What I really like about writing is that you can just go for it, and if you're not directing that screenplay, you don't have to sort of censor yourself about the logistics of pulling off a scene. So there's this sense of freedom that you just put it all on the page and write these big elaborate scenes with crowds and cars and dogs, and then it's the director's problem.
Yeah. So if you were the writer director, you might scale it down.
Oh yeah.
Really? No, come on, be honest.
Absolutely, yeah.
Your urge to tell a story wouldn't supersede, you just think, the producer can make that happen.
Sometimes, but logistically what goes into pulling that off.
Yeah.
On the page, it's one thing, but actually to pull that off is a big headache. But then if you're just a writer, it's someone else's headache.
So in a series like Redfern Now, where the writing is just so incredibly good, I mean it's one of the best drama TV series on television I've seen in a very long time, and you've written some exceptional episodes for that series, and they've won awards quite deservedly. Do you think you would have written them differently if you were going to direct those?
Good question.
I mean, in Pretty Boy Blue there were some humongous scenes, and I knew I wasn't directing that, so it gave me the freedom just to go bang, put it on the page.
Could you describe one of those ones that you would write for somebody else to solve the problem?
Well, there was a whole funeral scene. There was a whole other big funeral scene that actually got pulled because it couldn't be scheduled.
Right.
So it turned into the mob walking down the street.
Yeah, which is actually much more powerful than
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's one of those balances, and then when the director comes on board, you have discussions with the director, and you have debates with the director.
I take it they get quite fiery.
Yeah, you get fired because it's your script.
So could you give us an example? Because we'll be showing a clip from Pretty Boy Blue this evening, or a couple of clips, just to give context for those who haven't seen that episode. And it was such a fantastic story, and so well told. It just looks like it must have been a harmonious process all the way through, because when everything is happening right and everyone's on the same page, the result is fantastic. So I'd love to know the argy-bargy that went on to...
I mean, it was a little bit argy-bargy.
Yeah.
But I mean, the story actually flowed pretty easily. The concept was given to me. Basically, I turned up in December 2010 to a workshop, and they said, "You're going to write about a death in custody." That was the brief. Okay.
And were you pleased about that? Or did you think, I would have preferred something
Yeah.
to... You thought something gritty, something really sink my teeth into... Oh, you weren't pleased, sorry.
No, I was scared.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it's one that you don't want to get wrong, isn't it?
And plus, I'm telling a Redfern story, and I'm from Darwin.
Yeah. And how does that translate? I mean, do you feel as though in some way... Does that self-doubt come in of... This is a death in custody story, so a really big national issue. And then also, it's a Redfern story. Do you ever have those demons that say, am I qualified enough to tell
What
this
is
one?
my right to tell their story?
Well, how...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a really close consultation with the Redfern mob. We sat down with the people and we met the mob that work in the police stations. So I got to know what they deal with. And I'd lived in Sydney for a little while, so I sort of knew how people spoke. And once the scripts were written, when the drafts were coming out, there were people looking at them within the Redfern community, sort of just making sure we weren't, we were staying on track. But we still had the freedom, we still had our own voice to say what we wanted to say.
Yeah.
And that was exciting, and that story, once found the characters and found their voice, it just had a life of its own. And then 3 or 4 drafts, and Rachel Perkins came on board as a director, and she wanted to change a few things, and I didn't want to change a few things, and she didn't, but Rachel always wins.
Okay,
So yeah.
Oh, okay, so basically the argy-bargy we were talking about earlier.
Creative.
Yeah, the creative discussions.
She wanted to do this and that scene, I said, no, that's doing that because of that, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
She said, no.
Could you give an example? From that, only because I love that story so much.
I mean, there's a scene just before Aaron Davis makes that decision to walk down and face his truth.
So the end scene?
Yeah, just as he gets off that couch.
Yeah. Yes.
Lenny's sitting next to him in my script.
That's right. So
But in production, she cut it. She said, I mean, her rationale was it moved on from magical realism. I said, no, Lenny represents his conscience. He has to let that go and face his demons. So that was that discussion. So,
and you won that one?
No, because he's not there. I lost.
Oh, sorry, I'm really confused. So she was saying that he shouldn't appear?
No, in the very last scene.
Yes, I know.
When he steps off the couch, he's not there.
Yes.
But in the script, he was there. He just sort of says, I know, without looking at him. In the script.
Is there? Would you like to give some context to that clip? It wasn't exactly the one I wanted to show you, but it's okay because it's all great, so it doesn't matter what we show you. But just so that the audience has an idea of what we were alluding to before.
I mean, that character, Aaron Davis, he grew up in Redfern and he works for the police, he's a copper. So he's caught in two worlds, the community hates him. They love him, but they hate him because he works for the police. And the police just sort of accept him and they think he's not a real black fella, because he's a policeman, so he's different. So he's caught in this world, and a young man, Lenny Brewster's brought in one day running amok, and he starts mouthing off at Aaron Davis, saying, he's been playing around with his daughter. That just tips Aaron over the edge. So Lenny gets locked up, but he's got a previous injury, which ends up killing him in jail. But there's a moment there where Aaron Davis can get him help, but he chooses not to. So that places Aaron in a very awkward position within his community. And Lenny's mother, Auntie Mona, grew Aaron Davis up. I hope this is all making sense. So he's reluctant to reveal the truth to her because she's going to slap him down. But what eventuates is he has to face the truth. He has to face his demons. He has to face his community. And he does that at the end. And in the casting, I was really surprised about the casting process. But I thought it was a really good choice. When they said for Luke Carroll to play Lenny, that's not who I seen. And I seen the audition tapes. I was like, wow. That's what's exciting about writing. You write, you have this sort of thing in your head, and then actors bring something else. Directors bring something else. Camera brings something. Sound. They all add to it. And then it grows. Because as a writer, you're just in your room, you're having a conversation in your head. And then when you hear an actor say those words, it sort of goes, wow. Really cool.
Yeah, and so when you watch an episode then in its completion, I presume you're not part of the process of it being edited, assembled. So you would watch the complete.
I mean, I get sent rough cuts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, and I imagine that is almost like watching somebody else's film in a way. Is it because of all that creative input, or does it still feel very much your own, where people are speaking your words?
Yeah, no, it's still yours, but it's interesting to see how it's interpreted as well.
Yeah.
And when you hear those words spoken, and look, I love Rachel Perkins. I love debating with her.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine.
And some of the things I disagree with that she did, she was right. Some things she was wrong. But
that's why this industry can be such a rewarding one, because the arguments you have are actually really interesting arguments, as opposed to boring ones that someone in an office might have. Like the arguments you have are because you both have strong creative integrity and you want to see a vision realised, and that's a really interesting lively discussion to have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, Rachel interrogates the script. She pulls it to pieces. You know, and I appreciate that. I respect that. So
you need that too.
yeah.
Right? Everyone needs
So
that.
that discussion comes from a really good place. You know, I think like she, in series 1, she also directed my other script, Stand Up, about the boy who wouldn't sing the national anthem.
Yeah.
And that was a huge logistical nightmare, you know, a hall full of 400 kids. That's that thing about freedom to write, not direct.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So it's almost a sadistic pleasure that you know, try that one.
Yeah.
Try to get that on screen.
But, I mean, she pulled it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, she probably rubs her hand, you know, as someone who wants to take that on board, probably rubs their hands together with the challenge, you know, sees your creative vision on the page and then feels obligated to do that justice, and that's part of the, as you would know, part of the director's role to really envisage how that's best portrayed.
But it's a huge process to get that screenplay to a shooting screenplay.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, it's, I forget how many drafts, but it goes through so many hands and so many people have opinions. So it's about navigating your way through that and sort of not telling too many people to piss off. You've got to, you know,
and it's
be diplomatic.
And also be discerning about what advice you take on board and what advice you...
You pick your battles.
Yeah. But also, you know, you can become uncertain as well and think, oh, maybe they're right. You know, so having enough of a vision to know what advice is worth taking and what advice is
But sometimes you just nod and then just do what you want and then see what comes back.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's, it's tricky. It's a big headache.
So talking about, but it's also a real blessing, isn't it, that you're not just a writer working alone like a writer of a novel might be, but you are very much being collaborated with throughout that.
Yeah, I think it's important for your script to be interrogated. Otherwise, you just sit in this wonderland and everything's fantastic and you're brilliant. You know, you need other people to read your words and get people's thoughts. You know, and because I mean, first drafts are always brilliant. It's the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth draft that gets tricky.
Yeah. So, talking about that scripting process and the drafting process, how influential has Jimmy McGovern been in your personal journey in that script writing endeavour?
Jimmy's been fantastic. I don't know if people know who Jimmy McGovern is. He created Cracker and The Lakes in a series called The Streets. He's an English legend.
BBC programs, very
he's a Liverpoolian working class scouse, he calls himself. You know, they're sort of the blackfellas of Liverpool. He's a good fella and great storyteller. And I love working with him. Like, he just gets to it and he just goes for it and he gives you the confidence to be brave and just spill your guts. But he also, if it's not very good, he'll tell you. He'll say, that's furniture. What is that doing in the scene?
Fantastic, yeah. So when you say the confidence to be brave, what example would you give, something that you've written where you think, Jimmy McGovern's advice here, that confidence to be brave, I wouldn't have written that without that confidence?
Well, I think the fact that we as, you know, blackfellas have to interrogate ourselves. You know, it's no more poor bugger me and blame everyone else. I think we have to look within inside our own community and deal with our own problems. You know, and just to put it on the table and then tackle it that way and, you know, be cruel to each other, you know, because that's life.
So when you say brave, you mean confronting issues within yourself or putting things out there that you think other people might take offence to?
Both.
Yeah. Equal proportion?
Yeah, it's different with each thing. I mean, there's a line in Stand Up where the character of Nick just slaps her man down, Eddie, you know. She said, look at you sitting on your corroboree ground recliner chair. You know, you're not that fella, you can't light a fire, you know. It's that sort of stuff.
And it's that kind of script writing which makes it such an amazing series, because it's really enlightening and humorous and very, very real. It's something that everyone can relate to, and I think it's universal. It doesn't go. I don't think it needs a cultural context. I think someone in New York would find that just as engaging.
Well, that was the whole premise of Redfern Now, you know. It was like, these are real stories about real people that happen everywhere. You
And it doesn't matter if it's a black person or a yellow person, or it's the. In a way, it's slightly misadvertised because Redfern now, Indigenous stories, but they are human stories. They are very much about humanity and the decisions that people make, and of course with the style that Jim McGregor comes with, a central premise, or the narrative flows through a single decision that's made or a single action, and it makes quite compelling viewing because there's a lot of character development that can happen within that. Is it a new way of writing for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love that thing. One little incident can unravel a whole, string of catastrophes, and at any moment that person can stop it, but they keep digging that hole deeper, and that's rich.
Yeah. So if you were to compare your writing for Redfern now, so relatively recent work, with something that you did much earlier, 2002, Cold Turkey, how would you say, or if you were to think about Cold Turkey now and the premise for that, and you might want to explain a little bit to your audience the premise for that feature, not feature, that drama film, would you do that differently now, or is it?
I'm not too sure actually, because I'm pretty proud of that film, and I think it is what it is, and the script and the story. I mean, it might be, I don't know, it's very similar to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and I know that's why I was sort of drawing that comparison, because if you just want to explain to your audience the premise for Cold Turkey.
Cold Turkey is a film about a younger brother trying to get out of the clutches of his older brother. Want to go on and get a better life, get a job and everything else, but his older brother doesn't want him to leave because he's going to lose his sense of power and his sense of place in the world, so he just gets him drunk and they go on this rampage and he just lies to him and they get locked up, so he just plays with his head, screws him over to keep him where he wants him to be.
That was so good to see.
Yeah.
That was spooky.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
But yeah, quite a powerful story. Are you speaking from experience, from...
that story?
Yeah, I mean, what
that story
inspired
is
that story?
based on a true story, loosely based on a true story, about two brothers and one nutcase brother screwing over the younger brother. And I was told to, just stayed in my head. I think it was told in about 95 or something.
Don't tell him anything.
We're going to film.
Yeah.
So it just stayed with me, and I just started writing, and it just evolved, and yeah, we got money for it and made it. Yeah, no, it's good to see it. I haven't seen it for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And so it is interesting that that's a drama film about relationships and key incidents.
Well, it's that sibling rivalry, which
Yeah.
I think everybody can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another film that we'd like to talk about this evening, which is My Brother Vinny. That's probably, I don't know, people say you're most well known for that film, but I don't know. I think your other work is also very well known, so I guess it depends on what circles you're in. But would you like to have a bit of a chat about My Brother Vinny and let us know how that came to be?
My Brother Vinny is a film about Aaron Pedersen, who's from Alice Springs. He's also an actor. And it's about him and his brother Vinny Pedersen. And Vinny's got cerebral palsy and alcohol syndrome, or fetal syndrome, I think. So, he's special, he's lovely. So it's about their relationship, how in their mid-30s they've finally found the space in their life to become brothers. Because before that, Aaron was always his carer and his disciplinarian and, his boss, and they used to not get on, they loved each other to death, but hard work looking after Vinny, So Aaron approached me, I think, 2005 to say, there's people interested, you want to do this film, direct it? I'll write it and I'll direct it, And you direct it? And I said, yeah, no worries, that's deadly.
And that's quite a privilege, really. Is there a reason why he chose you, do you think?
Oh, we've been mates for a while.
Yeah.
So, but then when I hung up, it was like, this is going to test the friendship.
You reckon?
Oh, yeah. No, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because we were going to go for it.
Yeah.
So I went down to Melbourne and spent about 4 or 5 days with Aaron, and we talked about story and blah, blah, blah. And then Aaron wrote the script, and he wrote this amazing script, Treatment. And then he gave it to me and he said, it's yours now, you can do whatever you want.
And with that, you can do whatever you want. If you wanted to spend a long time making the film, in an observational kind of way, did you have that option, or did
That was budget.
Oh, okay, right, yes. So what realistically was the time frame that you had to tell that?
We shot that in about 16 days.
Yeah.
And we cut it in about 5 or 6 weeks. That's like rough cut, fine cut,
Yeah.
everything. So it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
But Vinny's, and one of the challenges with that film is because Vinny knew us and he's going to talk to the camera. So rather than fight that, we just let that be part of the film.
And I think that's kind of the warmth,
Yeah.
the warmth of the film. And he, by that, Vinny creates this real affection with the audience, because it's almost like that he's talking.
I mean, Vinny's a star. You don't even see Aaron. Aaron gets booted off the screen.
Yeah.
That should have been called My Brother Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. He very, he shines through there as the character that everyone falls in love with.
We had a screening at the Opera House, and I mean, there's a line in the film. He says, he's walking on the street, and he says in the film, he says, "I'm going to be famous, and people are going to ask me for an autograph, but I don't have a bloody autograph."
Yeah.
And then at the Opera House, when it screened, he was famous, and they brought out a table, and he was signing autographs.
Yeah, all of a sudden he had an autograph.
Yeah.
And it probably, if it hadn't been for other people telling him that he should tell that story, he may not have found a reason to tell it. So it's good that other people sort of kept saying to him, you should put that down. And I think, as that clip just shows, the part of the beauty in the film as well is bringing up the unexpected joys and pleasures that come with looking after someone like Vinny, that Aaron's saying that what he's given him and the responsibility has been a gift.
That's right. I mean, Vinny gives you a perspective on life. He's got reason to whinge, but nothing. He lives life.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, as you say, Vinny's not always easy to handle. Were you tempted to show some of the less endearing sides of Vinny within that film?
I mean, there's bits and pieces of it in there.
Yeah.
There's that thing where he clashes with the lady at the centre he works out. And there was other bits and pieces, but like we had a 15-day shooting period, like with observational doco, we just sort of spent time with him. But maybe it would have benefited, I'm not sure.
Oh no, I was just wondering if you deliberately decided on
No.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that, have you had, I'm sure you've had a lot of feedback from that film, but is there anything that you keep hearing again and again? Because that's such a loved film, really.
Yeah, we made that in 2006 and it's still being screened today, like 7 years. Yeah, 7 years later.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? What do you think?
Well, it's got heart, and it's got soul, and fantastic characters, and it's I think the characters are honest.
Yeah.
And you like them. They're engaging. And they're honest.
Yeah. And actually, we should get to talk about Big Name No Blanket, but we do have some time before that to talk about Croker Island, a film that you made not too long ago. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about that.
Croker Island Exodus is a story about a mission on Croker Island in the 1940s where all the resources of the government were directed into Darwin about defending them, with invading Japanese. So there's this group of missionaries and these stolen generation kids stuck out on Croker Island. And basically the government abandoned them. So, led by, I think it was 4 missionary ladies. Margaret Somerville was one of them. They got off the island and 4 missionaries, 95 children, trekked 4,500 k's to Sydney. So it is that story. And out of those 95 kids, when we were shooting, there were about 20 that were still left. And there's about 4 or 5 main characters that we spoke to. And, they're all in their 80s. And they've got such fantastic stories. And I'm so glad we had the opportunity, and they gave us the opportunity to tell their story, because they loved it. It was good to hear them talk, and lovely thing when we had a screening at the deck chair, Alice Briston, one of the characters, her great granny come up to her and was going, oh, crying to her, and, oh, I didn't know you had all that foot, you know, feeling sorry for her. So it's good that the next generations. And what was really good, we got the great grannies of the people that actually did the march to play the kids. So in a sense, they're walking in the steps of their family, you know. So that was a nice little resonance. So the ladies talking, you know, Netta Cahill and Alice Briston and then Jessie, and there was a couple of others I'm forgetting, but you know, there was
Netta.
Netta Cahill.
So you have these characters with an amazing story to tell, and quite an important story to tell. But as a filmmaker, as the person who will see the vision of how that story is told, what were your influences there? Because it was told in a very poetic way, in a very beautiful way, as a
Yeah, it was a mix of doco-drama, and because we were going from the past to the present, we used this technique where seamlessly we had, you know, the ladies today looking at themselves as younger people, and that was influenced by an American director called John Sayles, who made a film called Lone Star, where he would seamlessly go from the present to the past and then back into the present again, in like a single shot or a sequence of shots. And it was like, I've seen that about 2001, it was like, wow, I'm going to do that one day, but I don't know where.
yeah.
And then when we started doing this film, like Alan Collins, he shot this program on Exodus, it was like, this is what I want to do, can we do this? We went, yeah. So we looked at Lone Star, and we didn't rip it off, but it was a reference. You know, it was like, okay, we'll do this and do that, we'll make it our own, we'll own it.
Cool. I mean, every work is influenced by other great work.
So I think that added to it. I don't think you could have forced that on any film, but that technique served this film, served the story.
And I'm sure that the characters enjoyed being part of that process. It's almost like being brought back into. Did they? I mean,
they did, but you know, one more time, please. You said one more time last time.
Yeah.
One more time, please. You're a liar.
So maybe when they saw it on screen then, but you know, so maybe the actual filmmaking process would be a bit tiring and arduous. Did they enjoy being brought back into that space?
Yes. No, they loved it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But you know, it was just, I mean, filmmaking, if you're not involved, is really anal and boring.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know.
But if you're not in there.
Yeah, and why are you taking so long? Are you incompetent or what? You know, are we working with the amateurs or whatever? Yeah.
And why are we doing it again? It was perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Don't you know what you're doing? Yeah. So, no, but it's a beautiful film and it's really well told. So we should get on and talk about the film that people will be watching tonight. Big name, No Blanket. Big band, a very big responsibility there to tell that story. What would you like to say about that experience?
Again, very grateful and privileged to be given the opportunity to tell that story. I mean, any film you're involved with and be a part of is an honour and a privilege, but also very scary.
Yeah.
I mean, every film's scary.
Yeah, especially when someone approaches you because they entrust you with their vision for that story and for the characters and the lives that they want to be told. So you know, that's a tribute to you as well, and the faith that they have in you as the storyteller of that. Yes, there it goes. Yeah, I mean, it's not just because you're the guy walking by. Hey, Steve, could you know? I think there's the integrity that you come with and the skills that you come with. So, but needless to say, I'm not saying it's not a fearless process.
No, I mean, with this film, when they asked me, because Rugby Man is are so well loved and so well known, and everyone has a part of it, has a piece of it, and has their sort of point of view on how the story should be told, everything else, and so that was tricky. But it was a long process. 2009 it was first being talked about, and we didn't start shooting until 2011, I think. So it was a dance, and because it was so big, it was really huge, you know. There wasn't that much actual material of, you know, George talking on camera. So that was a challenge. Like, how do you tell someone's story when you don't have actually that much material of them talking? So you get to sort of get other people to tell the story. And, you know, the trick was, how do you tell his story? Rugby band was a big part of his life, so that had to be sort of the frame to tell his story. And, you know, and it was always going to be talking about his demons. You know, he's a rock and roller, access all areas. If we didn't go there, it would have been a big cheat. I think, you know, we had to say he was a larrikin, but good way.
And so were there any argy-bargies there about what could and couldn't go in, or what should or shouldn't go in?
No, it was pretty much, I mean, there's a shame job factor too, you know, for families, so that was tricky. You know, sitting down with his wife, Susina, that was, you know, you have to respect that.
Yeah.
So there's stuff that's not in there,
Yeah.
because you have to respect that fact. But Susina gave us enough, and you have to appreciate and respect it. I keep saying that word, but that's what filmmaking is as well, as respect.
Absolutely, the relationships, and again, you're entrusted with that story.
And like the family was heavily involved, like his father Charlie and brothers Dutchin and, you know, Lele, and like we had a big lead-in period where we just go sit on our island under the mango tree with the family, just sit and talk. You know, so it was about them meeting me as well. You know, meeting the crew, meeting the camera, meeting sound, because we're going to be hanging around for a while.
Yeah. And so how long did you kind of hang around before you decided to film things and in that
It was a few months.
building the trust and relationship?
I mean, we weren't there for a few months, we just sort of bounced back and forth.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was never going down the line.
Yeah. Absolutely. The perks.
Yeah.
So what were some of the complexities or the challenges that that come with making a film like that, from a filmmaker's perspective?
How do you tell the story?
Yeah.
You know, whose voice is it going to be? Who's going to be... I mean, Neil Murray was always going to be a big part of that.
Yeah.
You know, some people say he's in it too much, other people say he's not, but because of their relationship, he had to be a big part of that film. And, you know, Neil had I showed him a rough cut, he came to my place in Melbourne. He said, take that out. He didn't like bits and pieces about it. I said, Neil, let's know him. You know, because that's it.
Yeah.
And then when he came to the Sydney screening, our world premiere, he loved it.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah. So how was it received? It's premiered in Sydney in 2013, this year.
Yep. That was fantastic. It was a great screening.
Seen in the big screen with a big audience.
First
time.
audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't know. You know.
And I'm sure it would have drawn a lot of fans, so a critical audience possibly.
And what was really good after that, we all went with Screen Australia ABC and hired this sort of bar afterwards. So Neil was there, Sammy Butcher was there, Sammy Butcher's son Jason, so we all went to this place and they had played an acoustic set. Neil, Sammy and Jason Butcher, Sammy's son, and played all these rugby band songs and had the whole crowd just singing, you know, and just see the look on Sammy's face, it's like, you loved.
Yeah.
You know? And I was watching him in the audience when the film was screened and he was, you know, he was there all the way.
And the family, were they at the screening as well?
No, they didn't want to come.
Yeah, really?
They were invited. I mean, we'd showed them rough cut, fine cut, picture lock off every stage of the way.
Yeah.
You know, his daughters and Susina and his son, and, you know, everybody's seen it, uncles and that, just to say, well, this is what it is. You know, is it okay? You know, so it was good.
Were they proud of you? Were they proud of what you'd done?
Yeah, well, I got out of Alcohol Island live, so that's a good thing.
That means
I didn't think
you didn't get speared or
no. They would have let me know.
Yeah. Should I open it up for the audience before we finish up this evening? Because I'm sure some people may have, well, if they don't have questions, I'll keep asking questions. But just to give the opportunity, does anyone have questions for Steve from the audience? His DOP surely has something to ask him.
Well, personally, I love Steve McGregor. He's one of the most genuine people I've met on the whole planet. And I congratulate you, my brother. It's not a question. Congratulations to you.
Thank you all.
Yes.
You spoke about looking at the photographs and how you were held by some of the people's faces and you wondered how they'd come to that point in the photograph. Did you work from any drawings or paintings as well?
No, it was mainly photographs. Yeah, black and white photographs mainly. The way the eyes was sort of, I'd stare into those. But yeah, it wasn't paintings, no. I mean, I can't draw, so yeah. No, it was always photographs.
Wanting to know the story.
Yeah.
And I think old photographs, especially when they're of people that you know are related to you or in some way have been part of your history.
Yeah, well that's right, they were my grannies, you know,
Yeah.
great-grannies.
Yeah.
They got these lovely faces and they just sort of draw you in.
Yeah, and I think there's...
You're part of them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You want to know what led to even just to that photograph being taken.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still love looking at those photographs.
Yeah.
Always look at them.
Yeah, I can understand it. Will they inspire another film? Yeah, you know, that the idea of photographs and what goes on. Only because when you say that, I'm thinking of a film, the intro to a film. Do you know that photograph?
Yeah.
As it,
I don't know. See.
Well, you are planning on making a feature film. You're working on something at the moment that's been
Chugging along.
Been chugging along for a couple of years.
Yeah.
It'd be great to see a feature film made by you.
Yeah, just got to get the script right.
Yeah, and I presume that working on Australia by Baz Luhrmann didn't make you feel like that was too big a beast, because that I'm sure was a very enormous experience.
No, you don't work on something like that.
That would just...
That's a machine.
Yeah, thinking about how you write and then what you might like to grapple with as a director, I'm presuming there'll be more human-centred stories as opposed to raging four-legged creatures across the plane.
No. We'll contain it.
Okay, very good. Does anyone else? Yes.
I'm a great admirer of your work, and feeling very sad that Redfern now is just finished on ABC. So
I know, what will we do?
my question is, yes, the bravery of those stories, but also are there more in the mix that you're planning?
That's sort of being discussed at the moment. What's the next step for that series? It may have a little bit of a rest. I don't think there's going to be 6 coming up next year. Everyone's sort of a little bit thin at the moment. And I think it'd be good just to end on a high and give a little bit of rest and see what happens. But everybody's keen to have Redfern now continue in some way, you know, because it's given a lot of people a lot of work.
Anyone else?
So it's just a follow-up one on that, the very first one in the series.
Family.
Now 2.
I had 2,
the very first one in that, which was challenging. I'm just wondering what kind of
Where the
feedback
heart
you got,
is?
where the gay Indigenous
Where that came from?
story.
Well, the writer and the director of that, Adrian Wills, is gay, and he actually, because we started writing Series 2 before Series 1 was shot, so when we had that meeting, Adrian came to the table with that story. So I think because he knows that world, and it was actually a couple that's a very similar story. There was a custody battle over their daughter. So it springs from truth. So that was Adrian. He brought all that to the table. And I think he did a really good job.
Yeah, I can't think of one episode where they didn't do a really good job, and that's what's quite extraordinary about that series.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the schedule is brutal. I think there's 8 to 9 days per hour of shooting. So at any one time, there's 1 ep in pre, 1 ep in shooting, 1 ep in post. And the same crew rolls over.
Oh, okay, right.
But in this second series, they had 2 DOPs,
Okay.
shot 3 eps each. With the first series, it was the same DOP. But everyone else, sound, design, art department. So it's like 12 weeks, 12 to 16 weeks, I think it is. So it's full on.
Yeah, intense. Are you tempted to direct any?
Well, I was offered to direct in the second series,
Yeah.
but I was finishing up Big Name Don't Make It, and it was clashing.
Yeah.
And they were saying, well, leave that and come and do this. And I said, well, I can't leave this.
No.
Yes, you can. No. So that was the thing. So, yeah.
So does that mean if there was a next Redfern Now series and you were writing on that, would you prefer not to be the director?
I'd like to direct someone else's script.
So that you don't inhibit yourself as the writer.
Yeah.
Thinking, yeah.
I mean, also I'd be interested to direct someone else's script.
Yeah.
Because look at it from a different point of view. Because when you write, you know everything about it. Then you presume the audience will know what you know. But sometimes that's not what happens.
So this feature film that you're writing at the moment, is that something that you would like to direct, or do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll be your. Oh, okay. You've written and directed before, so it won't be your first. But
No.
Okay.
See what happens.
Yes.
Who will give me money? Because that's what it's about. You got to get the money.
Yeah. Anyone else with some questions?
I think actually, Laura, that we've run out of time for
Have we? So,
yeah.
so is there another script? So what's the schedule?
Yeah,
for
I'll
now?
explain.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. We've only got 20 minutes until we need to start the film. So if everyone could put their hands together for Stephen.